never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi guys, welcome back to my Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stephan Neff. Another fantastic day for an interview because I've got Dr. Anne Katona Linn with me. Anne is an amazing woman who has come on board and is a co-author in our beautiful book, Depression Lied to Me. And today I've got the honor of talking to her about her work that spans really the last 25 years. And she is a woman who is not taking for granted the world with all its misery, but she's actually going out there and she's kicking ass and she's trying to prevent things escalating. She's going to the schools. She is putting her money where her mouth is. And now that is action. That is something that I want to honor because it's those unsung heroes that are going out there and trying to make this world a better place. They're not the ambulance on the bottom of the cliff. They're trying to put fences up there and create strong young humans that are more resilient and therefore do not fall prey to the vices and all the temptations and maybe the wrong behaviors that are out there. So Anne, welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me, Stephan.
An absolute pleasure. How do you get into work like that? I mean, you don't just wake up one day and as a young girl and think, hey, you know what? I will go into schools. I will make a difference here in the world. I mean, who did you want to be when you grow up?
That's actually a really great question. My story's kind of complicated, but when I was young, I was very athletic, and I actually was in physical therapy in my previous life and was an athletic trainer. A lot working in schools. I loved working in schools. So I worked in higher ed, but in universities and colleges, but I really found the love of what I was doing. Working in high schools probably the most was where I was the most. And from that, I just really loved the relationships with the kids. And I also have my own story of childhood trauma, which I didn't, at the time, I was really not interested in really looking at all of that when I was in athletic training. Though as I got a little bit older and kind of went through a variety of different things, which I talk about in Depression Lied to Me, that really made me want to look more at myself and kind of learn a little bit more about who I was and what was really going on with me. I've always had that interest. And so really digging into my own history, I really identified that I wanted to work in schools with kids, especially with kids with behavior problems. It just kind of came up as that's really where I want to go. I was working with twin girls and they had behavior problems and I fell in love with them. And I had a natural gifting that I understood who they were and what their behaviors were where they were coming from, kind of what was the cause of their behaviors. I understood that a little bit more. And I really had a lot of empathy. I've always gotten those kids. Those kids who have more challenges, developmental disabilities. I really gravitated towards the kids with autism and behavior problems the most. And I ended up becoming a special educator and a behavior analyst because I wanted to figure myself out. And so I just really loved working with the kids. And the more I did work with the kids, I realized also that I naturally fell into working with the adults. I remember having my supervisors ask me to do trainings, and that wasn't necessarily my area, though I really fell in love with that. And it was just kind of a natural place for me to go. So for the last 20 years or so, I've been doing training, consulting in schools and coaching. And then I was state project director for a big grant that came out of the Sandy Hook and the Columbine shootings, Safe Schools, Healthy Students. And that really, I think, was one of the areas that I really fell in love with this work and really doing more to bring all the partners together, all the community, teachers, the kids, really getting the youth voice out there, then I really realized that that's what I wanted to spend a lot of my time doing, which has led me to now having my own business and supporting schools and really getting in schools directly rather than, I don't want to do stand and deliver trainings. I want to coach school districts to help create safer environments, to help that, it's not just the students, it's the adults that are feeling supported so that everyone can be more successful and focus more on prevention rather than just waiting until kids are really struggling.
Wow, that must be such a challenging clientele to work with. How do you connect with these youngsters, especially youngsters who are have gone through maybe a darker life and who are always on the defense? And often enough, the bad behavior that we see is a pure trauma response. How do you break through that? Because many parents struggle with that. Many other caregivers or teachers don't know what to do. How do you go about that?
I think one of the big things that ironically is sort of a gift of my childhood trauma, I think I've always had this feeling of my inner child, and I've always connected with that. And it actually always reminds me of what it was like to be young again and be vulnerable and to be struggling with things. I remember that. And actually, some of the traumas that I went through as a child, I remember them like they just happened. So I'm, we're talking 50 plus years later, I can still remember them. So I think in a way, it's actually a gift because it makes me, whenever I'm in front of kids, I automatically kind of go into that mode. I think one of the big challenges, though, is that obviously not every adult is going to have that experience. We need to look at them and be curious about the kids that we work with. We often make assumptions. I think that's one of our biggest mistakes, is that we make an assumption about a child by what we see on the outside, and we don't really know what's going on. The behaviors are the loudest, but really, we all have internal behaviors. They're the private events. These are the things that are going on, whether it's our self-talk or different emotions that are going on, things that are going in our body that we often don't pay attention to. And that, to me, is why it's so important for adults to pay attention to their own emotions and being able to understand that, so that when they are with the kids, it's easier to then relate to them. Being just curious, asking questions. What do you like? Find out what they're interested in. Get to know the students. Really
Absolutely.
pay attention to them is really one of the biggest things that I see. And that's challenging when you yourself are stressed as an adult.
And you just pointed that out, because right now, as we are recording that, we are about 5 days, 10 days out from Christmas. I've had a year from hell, and so many people out there have experienced the same high level of stress and low levels of constant distress. And I feel that my empathy towards my patients, towards my colleagues, towards everyone is paper thin. It doesn't take much for some very interesting voices to come out. Luckily, the filter works well at the moment. I don't let them play, but I'm not far off. So how do we do that? I mean, here we have got our youngsters struggling. We are struggling. How the hell? Probably the teachers are struggling. Let's not be silly. They are human beings too. So where do you start?
Yeah, And it's also the administrators. It's every single layer of our world. Everyone is really struggling, even if they don't necessarily realize it. And so we can't just say, go ahead and, take a mindfulness class or do yoga. People don't want to hear that. We just were on a plane a few days ago. We got back on Wednesday, and they talk about how we have to put our own oxygen mask on. And that is such a crucial thing for all of us to remember. And I think it's easy for us to say, oh, yeah, sure, I have a ton of things I have to do. It's just, we have to create environments for everyone to feel comfortable, and that, sometimes we have to let things go. We have to pick our battles. We don't have to have things perfect. We just have to look at what is going to be good enough, and how can we make sure that no matter what, relationships are at the core of everything that we do, and that we're fostering an environment where relationships are the priority. And one of the challenges is that people say, well, we should be teaching academics that, we've gotten so behind on the academics. We need to focus on everything we've lost over the pandemic. The challenge, is that unless we address the kind of the emotions, the stress that from the students all the way up to the administrators, the principals, the superintendents, whatever their title is, those leaders and teachers have to have their own oxygen mask on. They have to be able to take care of themselves first. And then it's actually going to have a greater impact on the students, not just with their behaviors and their emotions. It's actually going to improve their academics. So this is always something that I think doesn't seem, it doesn't connect with people, and people look at that as like, no way. But we're one person, we are our emotions, we are our, every aspect of us, we are our relationships, we are our work, our body, our mind, our soul, everything is connected. So we really have to make sure that we are paying attention to what our bodies are telling us. And if we're stressed, that's going to impact how we work with the kids. So, and as I said, it's not just an individual. We have to create environments where wellness is prioritized. So whether that's check-ins, that there are group opportunities to discuss and decompress. And even if those are short little mini breaks, something just really quickly, so that we're always checking in with ourselves as well as checking in with each other to make sure that those things are happening, and that we are taking care of ourselves, and then being able to help the kids.
And it is actually, in principle, to look after yourself is actually not so difficult. It is amazing, however, how little emphasis we put on it, because it's nearly frowned upon. You are selfish. Well, no, I'm actually looking after myself. Yes, it is the third time this afternoon that I go to the toilet. Yes, A, I've got a full bladder. B, it gives me actually a minute of calming down, because I can take a deep breath there. I can maybe have a glass of water whilst I'm there, and I'm removing myself from maybe a stressful environment, rightly or wrongly so, and then I go back in refreshed. And it is that little thing, those little micro breaks, that can make all the difference for you to go through a day more or less successful, or more or less rolling with the punches, whatever the day brings to you, compared with falling apart or bringing out the really nasty person in you that no one really likes so much, including yourself. So, but these are habits. These are habits, and we are not looking after ourselves there. And I think the underlying there is the way we talk to each other. To ourselves. you would never talk to anyone in the way that you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
So now, if you just take that, how many times do you say, oh, you idiot, you failure, you whatever it is? So we have got this kind of voice in our head whom we are giving so much power, and then we are surprised that we are not taking action and looking after ourselves because we're putting ourselves down the whole time.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? What I'm just saying, what do you think about that? How can we change the habits in ourselves and therefore be better role models for the children?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things is for us to stop that self-talk and just be more gentle with ourselves. And so one of those things, even just very simple, what am I grateful for? Kind of some of these basic things that we may have done when we were little kids, or we were taught in school or something, really not taught in school, just saying thank you. Thank you for,
Mm,
for giving me a positive, I have a place to sleep tonight.
mm,
Thank you. And not talking just to other people, talking to ourselves and being grateful for every little thing. Because if
mm,
we look at some of those little things and have kind of a shift, then it makes it easier to get through the difficulties.
mm,
So when something is challenging, I always try to think about, what can I learn from this situation?
mm,
And so, I think that doing something like just breathing and checking in with myself and noticing, like I said, it's we have to pay attention to our self-talk and how our
mm,
bodies are responding.
mm,
If my stomach is tightened, what's going
mm,
on?
mm,
I need to pay attention to those private behaviors that are going on.
mm,
And so I think just being able to look past that and do something about it, not just notice it and then ignore it. It's, let's notice and do something different. So I'm going to take a breath.
mm,
Okay, I'm noticing that maybe I'm holding my jaw a little tight.
mm,
I'll just move around
mm,
and reset. It's kind of a reset. It's just those little things. Like, I use sticky notes all over the place. So I have lots of things that will remind me, because otherwise I'd forget and I
mm,
would be really hard on myself. I'm not perfect with this at all. It's just that I need visual reminders to say, okay, what am I going to do to shift so that it's simple and easy for me to do? So
mm,
just on my mirror when I wake up, having positive affirmations for myself, starting the day, whether it's like a prayer, meditation,
mm,
doing those things for myself and being able to say no. So that's the ultimate thing, being able to say no. And I think actually the pandemic kind of gave us a gift in that we didn't have a choice.
I agree. I
You
agree.
know, my husband actually had an accident 3 years ago, right before the pandemic, fell 30 feet off of a roof. There were so many, he survived and is doing amazing. And we're actually just starting to write that book. And it's, there were so many things that happened though that prepared us for COVID. It made it easy for me to say no,
Mm,
so yes, it was a bad situation. And one of the things that we realized is that it actually prepared us for COVID. We
mm,
were already kind of hibernating at home. I
mm,
was already picking up more work doing it from home.
mm,
My husband didn't have any opportunity other than he just needed to rest and
mm,
do his own therapy. And so, paying attention to those things and reminding ourselves about that, no matter what bad situation is going on, if we can look at those little subtle things like, okay,
mm,
what did I do well today?
mm,
One little thing, and we pay attention to those a little bit more, then those are going to kind of take over. It's our energy goes where our attention flows. So if our attention is to negative things all the time, then our energy is going to go to that, and it's going to suck our energy. And so that is a habit, though. The more we do it, just little baby steps, take a breath, pay attention to something positive. I look outside my window, I see, yes, we have some snow that's been coming down, but there are beautiful trees, and I actually love snow. So I love to see the picture. It's, paying attention to the little subtle things and doing that more often.
Now, let's circle back to why we are here, because, Anne, you're there for prevention. You're going to schools, you're working with maybe disadvantaged and maybe challenged teenagers. Yet, the last 20 minutes, we've been talking about the parents. Guys, do you realize we haven't gone off topic here? We are spot on topic, because it is our power as parents and as role models to model a certain behavior. And by us actually stopping for a moment and say, wow, what a beautiful rainbow. Literally stopping the car. Wow, look at that beautiful rain cloud, or whatever it is. You are setting a precedent. You're not just going, I need to go home, or why is that the whole day like that? Yes, there are moments for your anger, but there are also moments for you to realize you have got a privilege of choice. You can choose how to respond to the environment. You can be silly. It's raining cats and dogs. It's pissing it down. And you can do something stupid like putting music on and starting to dance in the rain. Can you imagine what your teenagers will think if you suddenly go out there, I'm singing in the rain, just something completely out, and people might actually call help for you. But
I know.
Okay, can you imagine that you will leave an everlasting impact on your children if you were to show such a behavior, and if you were to model something different?
Yeah.
So therefore, it's so beautiful to actually just think about that and maybe let the inner child in you out. And then maybe, just maybe, you're actually doing the same that Anne is doing in the schools, to actually create a bond, an unspoken bond between your children and you, because you're no longer the hard-ass disciplinarian, but you're the crazy guy who dances in the rain. Or does something similar like that. Or, make some pasta and turn the kitchen into a nightmare to clean, but have fun as you're doing it, and bring your kids or teenagers along, and just make them laugh. Be goofy, be crazy.
Yeah.
Why do we know that these kind of things work? We know, for example, from studies. And studies, unintentional studies, actually. There's a beautiful study was done with cerebral palsy children. And the question was, if hyperbaric oxygen, i.e. you put these children into a dive chamber, give them high concentrations of oxygen over 30 days, will that make them better? And that study was done, and there was a control arm in that study, which was intensive physiotherapy. And what is better? Or, they thought this was actually the control arm, and the other one was the treatment arm, the hyperbaric. Turns out, both groups of youngsters were massively improving. And it turns out, funnily enough, if you actually focus on a relationship and be there for a child, regardless of what it is you're doing, they will get better. Now, that was a very interesting study when people try to analyze it. So there is so much more that we can do, but that we don't, because we get sidetracked with those things that maybe are not so important with hindsight. So here you go, guys. We have got a power to change things. And that is exactly what you're doing. Now, you're going to the schools, you're being out there, but you've got so many other strings to your bow. But you are an author, not just with me, not just with the beautiful Depression Lied to Me, but you have got a new book coming out, isn't it? Tell us about that.
Yes, I do. I go into schools and I do training and coaching, and I share my own story of overcoming childhood trauma and kind of the different aspects of it that I go through in my life and how it impacted me and
Mm,
what were the things that worked, what didn't work.
mm,
So it's called Shedding Lies, Living Beyond Childhood Trauma. And
mm,
I'm really excited. It's going to be coming out probably in mid-January. And because I share my story a lot in my trainings, it helps people to understand that I'm not just somebody who's coming in to tell them what to do. I'm I was one of those kids. I was underneath the radar. And so it gives me some credibility with people when they realize that I kind of
mm,
walk the walk.
mm,
And so it's exciting. So it sets the stage for the work that then do is, again, helping systems, helping them to create the environment, which is more than just,
mm,
looking at something positively. That's a piece of it. But it's how can one of my nicknames is the Spider Lady because I connect the dots within a school so that they can work smarter and not harder. I
uh,
can see the big picture and help them to be able to say, all right, this is working, this is not working. Let's make sure that we're putting all of the pieces together and training and coaching teachers so that they also feel supported as well as the administrators.
mm.
So yes, I'm excited about my book, and it leads to, part of it was my husband's accident that triggered a lot of people were telling us that you need to write a book, and we're like, okay. And so kind of pushed me to start mine. I had to get past that imposter syndrome, but it's exciting that it's now happening. So
Oh, I'm really pleased for you. And by the time this interview is being broadcast, your book is out. So, guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast because Anne's links are in there, and you can make sure that you can get yourself a copy of Anne's new book. And equally, maybe just maybe, Depression Lied to Me, or my Steps to Sobriety here, which is my book. And there's so many beautiful voices out there, people who have gone through the darkness and are now making sense of it by sharing their story so that others might just get the message that there is hope, that there is help, and that you're not alone. And I think that is so important. Now, I can understand all the work that you're doing, and when one looks at that, you can imagine sort of a middle class school where there are the odd behavior challenged teenager, or you've got sort of the extreme 5% that make 90% of the work, and then you have got sort of the undercurrent there, the 20, 30, 40% of youngsters that are actually sort of just borderline on diagnosis such as anxiety disorder, etc. So that's sort of maybe a picture that you've got in mind. Where I live, unfortunately, there are some really rough schools and some really rough areas and if you look at, if recently I anesthetized a warden of a youth prison, and he said, well, 90% of the inmates have got fetal alcohol syndrome. So in other words, their parents were pissed and drugged when they created that little human and handed down the addiction and everything in that. So these youngsters are way on the back foot. Does your approach work there as well?
yeah, actually, we do. My husband and I, and a group of us from Young Life, actually do a ministry. We go into a juvenile detention center that is near us, and just basically building the relationships with them and making it safe for them to have a relationship with a caring adult.
Mm,
So regardless, and I've done some work in a prison near
mm,
us, and I've shared my story with these guys are lifers in a prison. And they just thinking about, I didn't think that my story would have an impact on them, but helping them hear my story, even though it was different from theirs, they still
mm,
connected with it.
mm,
And to this day, it's been, I think, 4 years now. We've been a part of a think tank going into this prison and helping them. They raise money for community nonprofits. They did they do art, and I've bought some of their art. I have plenty of their art in my house, and these guys are my friends. So it doesn't matter what your background is. It's about looking at someone else as a human being and seeing yourself in them, even if you can't necessarily see that. It's looking beyond what's on the surface. So
true.
all of this, the basics of relationship really are for anyone. So that has to be kind of the number one priority is let's make sure we're setting up the environment to foster those relationships. So it doesn't matter what the location, how difficult the school, it may take a little bit more work, but it ultimately comes down to that relationship. And then teaching them skills other than just the academics. We have to teach things like, how do you recognize your emotions? How do you manage your emotions? How do you, set goals, and helping them to recognize, let's look for the positive, so that then as we make little baby steps towards that, we can have a better voice in our head that's saying, you know what, I did do all right with that, and the more you practice that, then it becomes that habit. It's the little baby steps that you keep practicing that becomes habit.
Exactly. Beautifully said. And I think that is the key thing. It is that I was completely incompetent, unable. It's no longer okay to say retard, but I was calling myself an emotional retard. I was unable to even name or describe what was happening in me. These were just waves of neurochemicals, and they were driving my life for the better part of my life. And it was only in rehab when we had every morning 10 o'clock feelings, and it was the most dreaded session because you were sitting around in a circle and no one said a word, and there was no agenda. And there were no sunglasses allowed, no hats, nothing in your hands. And it was just sitting there. And sooner or later, someone said something, and then someone else said something, and then, whoa, tears, anger, things came out, things like emotions. And it was beautiful because we were not running away from them. We were not numbing them with drugs, etc. But it was actually experiencing them and letting them out, and then thinking about them. And it was the most bizarre thing for me. This was the hardest thing for me to do. And I'm not the dumbest. I'm not I'm a doctor, so my education and all the sharpness up there, that was always there. Yet there was no education about my feelings. There was no education about what was going on in my heart, so to speak. Therefore, please, it is regardless who you are, what you do in life. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur with I don't know, 8-figure income, or if you're just making a living scraping by. It doesn't matter. We are all the same when it comes to that. Many of us are just have no clue about our feelings. Now, it's beautiful that you point that out, that if we were to actually explore that and learn a bit more about ourselves, would we not be in such a better position to then, again, role model and maybe talk about these emotions to our children who have them on steroids? I mean, their emotions when they're in their teenage years with all the hormones going around, for crying out loud, you have got that happening. And would it not be nice if you can recognize a depression, if you can recognize sadness, if you can recognize joy and all these things, and say, yeah, that is okay.
Yeah.
And
these are not just things that are kind of, again, touchy-feely. These are those, Google did study, they did Project Oxygen, and then now Project Aristotle. There is a lot of big Fortune 500 companies that are successful because they focus on team building and relationships and really helping to create those environments. They're going to be some of the most successful. So it's, they're key skills that are not just something that sounds nice. They're really critical, and even more so now than ever. I think they're critical. So,
well, I love what you say, Anne. What would be the one thing that you would send back in a time capsule as a message to your younger self?
Probably that it is okay to be feeling what you are, and you're worthy. That, I think, is that voice that was pivotal, that no matter what, if I had the feeling that I was worthy, then a lot of the other issues that had come up probably would not have been there. And it's not always something that we tell kids. It's not an intentional, it's like an act of omission that we often forget some of those things. So it's being able to tell ourselves and tell each other that we're doing well. And I think that's what it is. It's go back to that, you are worthy, and you don't have to keep trying to prove yourself.
Exactly. You don't need to try so hard. That's exactly what I would
Which
say.
ironically is what I told my husband on our first date. So
That's
a whole other story.
Oh, wow. Right. Okay. Wait for volume 2 of this interview. Oh, no. So true. So true, though. And you're an amazing woman. Thank you for the work you're doing, for going out there and talk to vulnerable people and putting those fences up on the top of the cliff. Because I strongly, strongly believe that this is the right approach, the right attitude towards our societal problems. And if you can just make that happen more frequently by actually making an impact now, by going out there, role modeling, and making little changes to our own lives, which then become habits, and which then, without you knowing, they have such a flow-on effect on the people around you. So don't think you're powerless when it comes to all that nastiness out there in the world. No, by you role modeling and by you living a life we're full of integrity, humility, authenticity, that is beautiful. Doesn't mean to say you can't be sad. It doesn't mean to say that you can't be angry. And you just say, hey, guys, today I'm really angry. I actually don't know what it is, or I know what it is because I just had a big row with my wife. And I'm now at work here, guys. I'm still a bit on edge. So sorry if I try to be not so nice to you. Just forgive me. Just understand. That's it. With you just saying that, acknowledging that, you were a leader. You're not a weakness. You're not a failure. No, you're a leader because you have demonstrated an emotional awareness that your mates around you just look at you and think, what the fuck is going on here? How beautiful is that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Powerful.
Isn't it? And you're amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. I have got the sensation or the feeling that this is not the last time that we have you on this show, because you're a woman who is evolving and transforming yourself. You have found your voice as an author, and we all go out there and want to make this world a better place. And if I reflect back who I was when I started this show, maybe 2-3 years ago, and who I am now, it's a very different man. And I like that. So guys out there, all the viewers and listeners, what will be your transformation? What will be your new habits that you are taking on? How can you make this world a better place? I challenge you. Come along for this ride that Anne and I are on. It's an amazing path. We are just a little bit further ahead of you, but it's the same path of making this world a better place. And hey, I think that's worthwhile living for and worthwhile making a difference. It's lovely. And look after yourself. And you guys out there, same. Look after yourself and live with passion. Bye.
Thanks so much for having me.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Trying